Back in 2004, when I was in third grade, about 8 years old, we had this mandatory environmental science class where we learned about pollution and global warming and all the other things that were affecting our environment. Now, I basically don't remember anything I learned that day, but one fact stuck with me all this while. The only thing that I remember from that class today, 13 years later, is when our teacher walked in and told us that the water table in Haryana is dropping by 2 meters every year. Now, remember, I was 8 years old. I had no idea what that means. I had no clue what a 2-meter drop in the annual water table represents. But hearing that number did something for me. It converted this idea, this abstract notion of sustainable development into this very real thing. It went from being a problem that affects other people into a problem that affects people I know and communities that I'm a part of. So it had hit extremely close to home. Over the next few days, as I brooded over this problem, I found myself asking a very simple question. Now that we know about all of these problems, why are we not doing something about them? And so I did. I convinced 3 friends of mine from school, and we got together and we started Green the Gene as a small club in our school. We started extremely simple. With help from our teachers, we planted 6 trees right outside our schoolyard. We tried talking to local shopkeepers and convincing them not to use plastic bags. But over all of these years, as we found more people who were excited and passionate about working for the environment, we grew. And as we grew, we took on more ambitious on-ground campaigns. But all this while, we continued to believe that climate change affects our generation the most. And so action must be led by us. And even today, our entire organization, all of our projects across all the 62 countries that we work in are entirely led by young people. Everybody who works for the organization is under 24. And these are people who volunteer their time and expertise while studying in schools and universities across the world. With thousands of passionate young volunteers, we've led multiple awareness efforts, river cleanups, planted over 1 million trees globally, and we also tried to bring change from the policy level. We worked a lot with local and national governments. We tried to push for stronger environmental legislation and better enforcement. A lot of us took up roles with the United Nations and got involved with various things. I myself started working with the UNEP and tried to push for greater environmental accountability. But in all of these experiences working with policy, we learned something very interesting. We realized that most environmental problems require very robust policy initiative from the top down. We realized that to be able to bring change to a problem so nuanced and so complicated, you need policy involvement. But a lot of the intended effects could only be seen decades after they were proposed. However, in that time, there are communities facing very acute and very immediate environmental crises. And these communities need solutions now. They need immediate action that can be technology-driven and bottom-up. So now imagine you're a woman in this rural part of Tanzania in this Mwanza region. Like most people around you, you during the day work in the fields and you plant rice. But at the end of the day, you have to walk 7 kilometers from your village all the way to find the closest source of usable water. And then you have to walk all the way back with a 15 kg jerry can of water on your head. You have to do that every day just to be able to cook food, wash clothes, just to generally get on with your life. Now in this situation, you're not worried about the bigger picture of climate change. You're not worried about how it affects economies. What you care about is the problems that affect you and the people around you. For you, access to safe and usable water is a much bigger concern. See, people in those communities need immediate solutions. Environmental legislation, governmental policy, and awareness in general, they have huge impact in the long run, and we've continued working on that. But in this process, what we realized was that they don't solve the problems those communities face today. They don't help them bring a jerry can full of water today. And so almost all of us at Green the G now focus on developing very simple yet extremely technology and data-driven solutions to extremely specific problems that are faced by communities. Because of the distributed nature of how our organization works, volunteers and partners come up with ideas from all across the world while they're working with different communities which are vulnerable, which are affected by these problems, and then they bring those together. This happens all the way from very urban parts of places like New Delhi to very rural parts like Mwanza in Tanzania. But to do this, to run things from a technology-driven perspective, basically had its own set of challenges. It's very hard to get taken seriously as young kids in terms of raising money, navigating governmental policy, or to just figure out logistics on the ground. So, for instance, in Tanzania, and I have a room full of engineers, so I'm going to go into a little bit of a technical detail here. We developed biosand water filtration units. Now, this is a point-of-use water treatment system that basically removes pathogens and different sorts of biohazards from water with a sand column, which is covered by a biofilm. In this, we basically threw in a bunch of sensors to measure presence of heavy metals and other pollutants. And then we used data from those sensors, and we trained a bunch of machine learning algorithms to figure out when that water became usable. Because of the extremely simple design of this process, this entire unit could be built in less than $25 and can last a few years with basically no recurring cost. And then we analyzed tens of gigabytes of geographic and demographic data to figure out where we need to deploy these units, so that they can be easily accessible by people who need them absolutely the most. With a lot of help from local governments, from our partners in Tanzania, these filters that we deployed are being used by 40,000 people today. And closer to home, in Faridabad, I'm originally from Faridabad in Haryana, we developed systems to recycle swimming pool water. Now, in our school swimming pool, and this is pretty common, this is pretty much most swimming pools use this. We have systems where they pump out 2,000 liters of water every day and then pump back in another 2,000 from the ground, that's fresh water. And then at the end of the season, you take everything that's in the pool and you empty it out and you let it run down the drain. This is typical, this is standard, but given the acute water crisis that Faridabad faces, we thought this was a wonderful opportunity for us to reclaim that water. And so we threw in a bunch of pipes, we connected them with boilers, we brought together things like sand filters, and then we used sensors to measure pH to use that as a proxy for chlorine content. We brought all of this together, built up systems that could then kind of simply take that water back and then recycle it. Again, this was a pretty simple concept. But over the years, we've been able to scale this a lot, and now we're recycling about 3 million liters a year. From more to a rural perspective, our partner organization, Ideas Uganda, developed technology for vertical and micro gardening. Now, this is basically a farm in a box. So now, imagine a box, and this is a box that you can place, a garden in a box that you can place on your desk, in your schoolyard, on any piece of land, basically. At the center is a column-like vermicomposting chamber, which basically converts waste to compost. And then it is designed with an internal bearing mechanism so that you can turn it up to 360 degrees so that all the plants get optimal sunshine. Again, super simple thing that you could probably be building as a mechanical project. But this simple design converts 9 square feet of plantable agricultural land into 36. And each of these boxes can fit 200 plants. So as a pilot, we're building and deploying 75 of these in Kampala in Uganda right now. In all of these instances where we develop technology and we try to kind of build ideas from very simple things, we work on a consistent theme. We run on the idea of not patenting anything that we build. And we very actively try to open source all of our data, all of our analysis, and basically all that we've built throughout this process. And then we go out and then we actively encourage other nonprofits and members from those affected communities to pick up our work, replicate it, modify it, build on top of it, basically adapt it so that they can directly use it to solve their problems. Now, this model of working entirely with young people driving environmental action through technology and then open sourcing everything we build basically has allowed us to expand and to scale and to multiply our impact manyfold. This model has basically allowed us, Green the Gene, to reach places that with our very limited resources, we just couldn't. And see, I strongly believe that climate change is the biggest challenge of our generation. And it is up to us, young technologists, engineers, and entrepreneurs to build solutions. Thank you.